please welcome Shé D'Montford.
All right. Thank you. I must apologise. Please let me apologise for running late. It was a miscommunication. I had it written in my diary as 2 p.m. and I was on time for 2 p.m. All right, so I'll pop my cup of tea down. Cup of teas make everything okay, don't they? All right, so yeah, so my name's Shé. I've done a lot of stuff, and it was a great privilege to be asked to come along here today. I brought a couple of these books. I was going to bring 10 of them along in case people wanted them, but I'm happy to pass those around and let you have a look. And you can have a look at some of the pictures, and I'll put one on one side. One's black and white, one's colour. So I was a publisher of several different magazines. I was the editor-in-chief of some esoteric magazines. And people used to send me photos of spirit, right, and go, are these real? What do you think? So this is a collection of some of the photos I've been sent over the years, and it's also a collection of photos that people have taken around me. I tend to be a bit of a spirit magnet. Now the idea of the book, when I wrote the book, was there's a wonderful gentleman who's a solicitor in Sydney, and I just can't, his name just escapes me at the moment. But he's put $1 million reward up for the skeptics to disprove life after death. Victor Zammit, thank you very much. And Victor's great. His heart is in the right place, because it was really interesting when we did the TV show. The Skeptics Society actually cancelled the $1 million reward while we were filming. Right, so, and they made us sign a contract that no matter what happened on the show, we would not ask the Skeptics Society for any money. Right, so we had to sign that. I gave Victor a copy of that, and he's like, oh, I put that in my files. But what happens on the TV with the skeptics is not scientific testing, right? And I have to tell you, I have a background in engineering and architecture. So I have a very, very analytical mind, which when I'm doing my spiritual stuff, I have to calm down, tell it to shut up so I can actually do this work. This stuff is real, right? The idea of writing this book was, this is evidence. My husband is a police officer. So what we did was we put together photographs, we put together first-hand accounts of how those photographs were taken in a way that they could be presented in a court of law if they needed to be, as evidence. Right? And they will hold up in a court of law as evidence. None of the photos are tampered with, and all of the originals are available. Right? So in a court of law, all you'd have to do is make sure you gave them the original photo that was, they can tell these days if photos have been photoshopped. It's a very easy test. Right? So all you have to do is pass them the original of the photo. One thing we find with the photos is that spirit seems to come out on the silver-backed photo paper much clearer than what it does in digital photos. I think the phenomenon that we're having at the moment with the orbs is what would be spirit photos if we were using film. Right? So majority of those photos in that book are on film, but there are a lot on digital as well. And there's some photos of me out camping where we were doing an on-country retreat with the Indigenous elders. And at the end of the retreat, the elders came back and they said, okay, now, did anybody see any spirit here? And what colour was it? Right. So the Indigenous elders look for the colour of the spirit that people see during these processes. Right. If you see a red one, it means something. If you see a white one, it means something. If you see a black one, well, apparently that's not good. Right. So, but the ones that we saw that are in the photo are very red, which is full of energy and which is very welcoming and greeting. The white ones mean they're still in grief and still mourning, right, according to the Indigenous tradition. So if you speak to an Indigenous person about spirit, even though with Indigenous traditions, they try and allow the fastest movement of that soul through for reincarnation as possible. That's why they, in most Indigenous cultures, if somebody dies, they go through their mourning period and then they collect all the photos. They burn the photos, they burn their clothes, and they get rid of anything that would make anybody say their name again. Because if you say their name, you're calling them back. Right? So I'm sort of starting my talk with you in the middle, because I know I'm preaching to the converted. Usually with this talk, I have to start with people that are sitting in the audience going, Yeah, spirit, prove it to me. Alright, so I might go back to the start, but just so that you have some information, when you're talking to people about spirit and they go, oh yeah, right, you're being crazy, we can say, no, I actually spoke to an engineer on the weekend, and she's written a book and she's got all these photos, and the husband's a police officer, and in fact here's some things to think about. So we'll start with some things to think about with spirit and then I'll take you through it in a way that you can not only prove it to yourself, because I think the biggest thing with groups like this is that you guys are all here, and it's a wonderful group, good energy, congratulations, but you're all here looking for confirmation of what you've already experienced, right? We study this in our universities now. It's called inattention phenomenon. You see something, you feel something, you hear something, but you don't believe it, so you pretend you don't see it, right? And there's a test that they do in the Super Bowl where they have in the past sent somebody out in a gorilla suit. And I was watching Mythbusters the other night. Anybody see that, Mythbusters? Where they used inattention phenomenon. They asked people in a study group to count. They had people in black shirts, people in white shirts throwing balls to each other, right? And that was actually supposed to be an observation of whether men or women are most observant. Came out even. Okay, so we're not starting any wars here. But what they did was they dressed somebody up like a zombie to walk through the middle, and they had a black jumper over a white shirt. And the majority of people did not see the zombie because they were focused only on what they were focused on, right? So you can say Mythbusters proves this as well. If you're not focused on it, or you don't believe it's there, you're not looking for it, you won't see it. And if you do see it, it was a really interesting show. If you can go and find it on YouTube somewhere, about the zombie walking through the group. I think it's called the Battle of Sexes episode. You'll see why people can actually see a ghost in front of them in the room and not know that that's what they're seeing, not believe that they're seeing it, and therefore won't. Inattention phenomenon, the very first recorded case scientifically we have of it is in the 1600s when Magellan was coming back from his spice route, and the spice route, he had to go down around the bottom of South America to go back to Europe from Asia, and he pulled into the Phrygian Islands, the Phrygian Islands, right down the bottom of South America to replenish and get out of the bad weather. And a lot of people know this story. He pulled into the harbour, was afraid that they were going to attack his armada because they were lighting fires on the beach as he was coming up. And he sent some very brave sailors ashore and said, negotiate peace and get us supplies. Well, not only did they negotiate peace, there was no peace that needed to negotiate. They came back laughing, right? Because they had a tale to tell Magellan that he didn't believe. And the tale was that these people could not see the ships in the harbour, so they weren't going to attack them. Why couldn't they see the ships in the harbour? Because they didn't believe they were there. Right? They came from a canoe culture, and nothing bigger than a fallen log in their belief system could float on water. So how is something that's 4 stories high going to be out there floating in the water? They couldn't see it. And the shaman, because the Spanish had been in South America for a while then, had to actually teach them, because he knew some Spanish, how to see the ships in the harbour. So hopefully by the end of this talk, what we're going to at least do is show you how to see the ships in the harbour. All right. So you should have enough belief in yourself after we're finished to trust what you're seeing. Because the few experiences I heard while I was sitting over there, every time I heard one, I was going, yes, yes, right? But you've just got to trust yourself. So much of this is understanding that we live in a bigger world than the skeptics are paid to keep us believing that we live in, right? The skeptics will never, ever, ever pay out that, because there have been plenty of scientific tests that prove in favour of psychic abilities and afterlife already, right? And it shouldn't go to an individual medium or anything. It should go to the scientists. Good on them. There should be more research into this, right? I'd love to see a scientist getting paid out by the Skeptic Association. Hey, second digression. If you were ever approached by the skeptics and a skeptic goes, I'm a skeptic, just go, yeah, but you skeptics, you're bits of frauds, aren't you? You go, oh, no, we're not. They go, yes, you are, because you're never going to pay out that money. And they go, we never have. Fraud 1. They originally did, right? Right. Who was the very first person that set up the Skeptic Association? Harry Houdini, right? Harry Houdini set up the Skeptic Association, and his best friend, Arthur Conan Doyle, set up the Spiritualist Association, right? And they were both set up, and their initial thing was to find psychics that were frauds, mediums that were frauds. But Harry Houdini believed, as is brought out in that book, Harry Houdini actually very much believed in the afterlife. He communicated with his mother in the afterlife, and he came back to his wife and gave her very clear messages that he had left as a signal that he was in the afterlife. In fact, all around the world, it was so successful. Every year, on the anniversary of his death, which just happens to be Halloween, there are these big seances for Harry Houdini all around the world. So not only has he become an icon of the fact that this actually works, that life after death is real, he came across a medium, a lady called Marguerite, right? And he was unconvinced, but he loved his publicity, and Scientific America jumped on board. Do you know this story? Somebody's going, yeah, Scientific America jumped on board, real scientists, right? They jumped on board and they said, well, let's scientifically test this woman and see if she's causing a fraud or if something's actually happening. Well, something actually happened so much in the room after about the 5th day that all the scientists went, oh my God, and they awarded her the $10,000. It was $10,000 in those days, right? But that would have been the equivalent of $1 million these days, right? And Harry Houdini had to pay her out. He tried to manufacture evidence to keep this going in the newspaper to say she was a fraud, and he got caught out for that, for being a fraud himself, and he had to pay an extra $5,000 into a fund for the Scientific America for him committing fraud. So the very first person that set up the Skeptic Association was actually caught out with fraud, right? But the medium wasn't. The medium was proven by the scientists to be accurate, right? So you can look that up, it's history, and if they ever give you a hard time, you go for that. You give them that little bit of history. Okay. So let's have a look at some other people in history, and I also want, I think one of the other things is the reason why we have trouble believing ourselves is that for the last 200 years, about 3 generations, death has been hidden from us in our society. Right? My father speaks very lovingly of my grandmother DeMontford. Right? She was a baroness's daughter who married a commoner, so she was sort of pensioned off and out of the family. But she was still a baroness's daughter, so when she died, she had to be laid in state, right? And people had to come and pay their respects, and lots of amazing people from England came and paid their respects to her. But because she wasn't living in a castle, they had a big house in Essex. They had the biggest house in Essex, but Nana de Montfort got laid out on the kitchen table. And that was not uncommon for those days. Dad went through the Blitz in England, and in those days they would send the older children away to protect the older children, but the younger children got left behind. So his father was being an engineer in the war, so there was only grandmother de Montfort left there to look after him, and Dad with much fondness speaks about this old woman that braved staying in the house to make sure the 2 younger children were okay during the Blitz. So he was very, very close to her, closer to anybody in the family. And they let Dad in first when she was laid in state on the kitchen table. And Dad remembers being very upset, because he's English, he's not supposed to show it even at 10 years of age, right? But he ran over to her, grabbed her hand, and let go of her hand. He said, and in that instant, he knew that Nana de Montfort wasn't in that body anymore, right? He knew that she'd gone somewhere. He just knew, right? So let's have a look at where this goes, what goes, and what's going on. So I'll give you an explanation. Now, my training, my spiritual training was by a lovely Tibetan lady. So a lot of these typical Tibetan or Alto Himalayan beliefs. Now, do not get Tibet mixed up with the Buddhists. Right? Two different things. Buddhism actually originally comes from India. It's not Tibetan. It was a whole set of belief systems that were there culturally before the Buddhists came along. And the Buddhists have adopted a lot of these, but some of them are different from Buddhism. So I have had in some of my groups go, oh no, the Buddhists don't believe that. No, she was definitely not a Buddhist. She was an Alto Himalayan shaman. She was one of those people who was very practically useful to her people. But she fled from Tibet to Australia in 1950, before the Chinese came in, and ended up here in Australia and ended up teaching me. So that's how I learned a lot of this stuff. So I'm happy to pass this on to you, and hopefully it'll be useful to you as well. So let's have a look. So the very first way I became aware of spirit activity was I was diagnosed as being a poltergeist when I was age 12. Now that doesn't mean I got sucked into a TV screen or anything like any of the movies. It was scary at the time, but nothing really scary happened. The worst thing that happened was we were having like knockings and rappings like that going along the wall. So if there's somebody on the other side, they think someone in here was knocking, which I just was. But for a long time, it took us a little while to figure out there was nobody in the other room. Right? Or, you know, the day we figured it out, my mum was on the toilet and I was in the bathroom, and she's going, "What do you want?" And I'm going, "Nothing. What do you want?" Yeah, it was. They're mischievous. They're mischievous like that, but they don't deliberately try and be scary. And there is, poltergeist activity has actually been studied by Cambridge University for 210 years. Well, it was when I wrote that book. Might be more now, so probably about 215 years. So it's interesting to have a look. And in all of those reported cases of poltergeist phenomenon where things fly off tables and you hear knockings and rappings and electrical interference with radios and all that sort of thing, nobody's ever been hurt. So there's nothing to fear of being with spirit. Only people that get hurt tend to be the children if the parents freak out and call an exorcist. Right? If you have these phenomena around your house, don't be afraid, and you don't need an exorcist. Right? And we'll speak a little bit more about that later. Right. So all of this brings us to the question of what is death. You know, in traditional cultures, death and life are intertwined, and people see that one is dependent upon the other. I didn't really get to understand that until I used to have saltwater fish. I used to have this huge tank in Byron Bay, and it was 4 foot one way and 3 foot the other, and it was almost roof high. And I got this tank, I was so excited about it, and I put all these expensive fish in it, and they died. And I went back to the fish shop and I said, "What happened?" And he went, "Oh, you're supposed to put sacrificial fish in first." And I went, "What?" And he said, "No, you've got to put some fish in there and let them die, because if you put fresh water in out of the ocean, by itself, it can't support life until something has died in it." All right? And if you think about life on this planet, what supports life on this planet? You think about the plants, right? There are no vegetarian plants. Vegetarian plants do not exist. They all live on the dead, rotting matter of other life in the soil. And if you speak to farmers, I was just listening to a thing about NASA, how they're going to try and grow things on Mars, and the biggest thing on Mars is nothing's died up there, so they've got nothing in the soil that will support life. Right? So you cannot have life without death. Right? And that's not a morbid thing. Right? When you understand that cycle, right, it becomes a little bit like chicken and the egg scenario. Which came first, the chicken and the egg? Right? We know that consciousness still exists, otherwise we wouldn't be here. Right? Now, with look, the other thing is with consciousness still existing, you know, one of our most brilliant minds of the 20th century, Albert Einstein, he believed in life. He called it life after life. He didn't call it life after death. Einstein actually hated organised religion. He thought organised religion used life after death to get money out of people and make them really sad and scared. He hated that, and he wrote quite a bit about that. But when he was asked, he wrote quite lovely, comforting letters to the wives of his recently departed colleagues, because he outlived a lot of his colleagues. He was also a bit of a ladies' man. I think it helped him as well. But in those letters, he describes over and over again that we know we cannot destroy energy. So the energy of that personality must continue on somewhere. So logical and so simple. If you can go into outer space, right, as the scientists do, put reflectors out there that pick up TV signals and sound waves from the 1950s, you know, where does the vibration of this life go? Well, most of us here understand that the vibration of that life usually stays around what it's interested in. Consciousness still exists. Right? Right. But my Tibetan teacher taught me that there were these 8 levels of existence. Right? Now, if you don't agree with this, I don't want to get into a stoush or verbal match with anybody about it. Just consider. Right? If you don't agree and you've got your own strongly held beliefs, that's fine, but this is just something for you to consider. And it certainly works for me, and this, from what I have seen, is what I understand to be true. She believed that the highest level of existence was this physical plane, right? She believed that we really had to have a lot of good karma to get here, because it takes a lot of energy to get here and a lot of energy to maintain staying here, right? Every spirit, she said, wants to come to this. All the gods want to have their avatars here. They all want to come to Earth and experience life on Earth because it is the ultimate. Anybody that thinks this life is horrible and is painful, you don't understand life on this planet, right? Anybody who sells that to you is trying to sell you something. Life on this planet is about joy. In fact, life on all levels is about joy. And the loss of that joy is what results in death, right? And the gaining of that joy is what results in reincarnations into the higher levels. So from the physical, we know that when we die, right, we slip into the ghost realm. Right? The physical body can no longer sustain the energy that is needed to keep our consciousness on this plane of existence. Right? So that consciousness slips down into the non-physical plane of existence, away from this physical. What does it feel like from the experiences that I've had with spirit to be in the spirit realm? Right? We forget when we come back. I asked you right now to be aware of your hands. Where are your hands? You'd have to go, oh, here they are. Right? For most of the time, we're actually not conscious of our physical body. And that's what it's like to be in spirit. That's why so many times when you have people who have had sudden deaths by accident or misfortune or murder, one of the jobs of the mediums is to explain to them that they have actually passed away. That people aren't just being rude, not speaking to them. They can't see them anymore. Right? And they can't figure out why they can't touch things. Why is their hand... and they feel a little bit drugged and dopey. You know, it's a little bit floaty out there for them. They think they've been drugged or they're not waking up properly. Right? But the consciousness is still there. And eventually they have to learn the rules. And with indigenous cultures, it's really good that as a person is starting to move towards that end of their life, that they start to have the rules explained to them. Right? The older ones will explain it to the next ones, and on it goes. And so there's that constant awareness, so there's no fear of death coming along with it. And what happens with the ghosts, a lot of people don't realise that the ghosts can actually die themselves. If you don't have enough energy to maintain your existence in that plane of existence, you slip down into the next plane of existence. And the next plane of existence is the shade and shadow realm. Now, I skipped over spirit, because spirit is simply a spirit that hasn't been in the physical. Right? So our angels fall into that category. They haven't been in the physical, so they have to go up to the physical, then become a ghost and go down that way. Shades and shadows are the ones that we see out the corner of our eye, and we go, oh, we see, we're aware of something there, that dark patch out the corner of our eye, we don't, and you turn around, it's really hard, they're very intangible. But when you've experienced some of the experiences that I was hearing here today, very tangible, right? Very real. Right? You know the difference between the two once you've experienced the two. Shades and shadow can also, and shades and shadow is where people tend to go there who are very, very sad in this world, who have committed suicide. This is the plane that a lot of the religions describe as Tartarus or purgatory or things like that. It's not torturous, it's just sad. Right? We go to Asia a lot, and the Hungry Ghost Festival in Asia is specifically for any spirits that might be in this realm. And it's an amazing festival. All the big businesses it's a matter of pride as to how much they care about their ancestors and other spirits. They build these big paper houses, they burn this fake paper money for them, they burn incense, and they put a big feast outside to feed them, to let them know that we still care about them. How do we show our children we care about them if we were around? How are you doing? Come sit down, let me cook you something, let me make you something to eat. You know, my son was 25 the other day. He came over and he said, oh, don't worry, I'll go down to Kmart and get you a new shirt. And he's going, Mum, I'm 25, I can get my own shirt. You know, we do things for them. And the same with the shade and shadow. It just shows that we're willing to lend them a bit of energy so they can get their joy back. So hopefully they can come up to there and then reincarnate in the physical when it's their time, when they're ready. But if they don't, they'll go down to the echo realm, which is even less tangible. It's just like a memory of what they used to be. Quite often when I do mediumship readings for people and I have somebody come in, oh, my dad passed away 10 years ago. What I end up reading for them is generally the echo. All right, so your dad looked like this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yes, and he had this sort of personality, yes. Right, it's really this that I'm looking at. This is where the Akasha is. Everything that's ever been, all the information that's ever been remains there. But if you stay with that, then you can go, oh, okay, now the image is changing, and now I'm seeing a boy, he's about 8 with the same hair colour, and he's got green and blue footy socks on, and he's playing soccer. Oh my God, that's my nephew. People, when they do get back to the physical, tend to come back in the same psychic peer group. Right? We reincarnate together over and over. Right? We come back and play again with each other. This, you know, a lot of people think of this life as the hard lessons. When you went to school and you looked forward to going to school, you didn't look forward to going to school for the lessons. You look forward to going to school for the lunch break, where you got to play with your friends. Right? And that's why we come back in the same psychic peer group, because we've got stuff to play with and work out with our friends in this life. So if you're the mother this time, next time you'll be the daughter, and so on, and it goes around. Right? It sometimes not that immediate, usually it skips a couple of generations and goes around. But this is a really important point. If you've got a woman who's so grieving for her lost child, once the grieving process is finished, like the Indigenous say, and you can let them go with joy to onto their next incarnation, they come back quickly. Children are full of joy, so they reincarnate really quickly. And that woman will get to hold that child again in this lifetime if she can finish her grieving and let go and understand that child is coming back. It may not be her own child, but it might be her daughter's child or her sister's child. And as soon as you hold that child, you go, oh my God, it's the same. They just know. I do so many readings for people and they go, give me this, they give me a photo of the child and they go, tell me what you think about this. And I start to get tingles as soon as I see it. And I go, well, yeah, you lost a child, didn't you? And they go, yeah, I did. I said, but this one reminds you of that child, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Yeah, you do come back. So this is why when we understand this life, there is no loss. Nobody can ever take anything away from us. Oh, but I've had in some groups people say, oh, but they can take your life. It's really interesting, right? The dynamics that we're having at the moment between, you know, there's so many dysfunctional parent-child relationships. Why? Because if you hate somebody so passionately that you're going to murder them, you get them back as your child, right? Or within your psychic peer group, so you can work your stuff out. It's a big deterrent to killing people, I tell you. If you've got to deal with them again, you'd never get rid of your problems that way. You've got to sort your stuff out and move to joy, right? With all of these wars that we've had, right? You just know that, you know, all those terrorists that have committed these horrible things, they're going to get these kids back and they're going to convert to Christianity. You just know it. And they're going to have to deal with the fact that they've got a Christian child, right? It happens. It happens. Gandhi even said that, right? When there was the big Pakistani-Indian conflict, right? And the people who were killing the children over there, he said, go and adopt a child from the other religion and raise it in that other religion. That's the only way you stop the karmic cycle that's going on there, right? So, Yeah, the emotional realm, if you've, like my husband, retired police officer, there are places in Sydney that the old police officers won't go. They won't go into the old mental asylums. They won't go out to where the island was, where they used to bring the immigrants in Sydney. I can't think of the name of the island at the moment. But what a rite of initiation is they get the young police officers to go out to these places, and they have to go, oh, we've got to go and do a security check through Roselle Mental Asylum. And they see ghosts, right? So most police officers will tell you that they've had a supernatural experience. They know about this stuff. But emotion stays very strongly in places like where there's been plagues, where there's been human suffering, old hospitals, old mental asylums. The emotion will stay there. Where there's been a murder, the emotion stays there. How did they know on sensing murder? How could they pick it up? Because the energy of the emotion, even though that person might have reincarnated, stays there so strongly. Right? It will leave an imprint. If they've gone down this low, they'll leave an imprint there, a strong one. If they can start to come up, it'll still stay in the echo. Right? The thought realm, ever walked into a place and you go, whoa, that thought was from the left? And it's when you walked into the place, right? That's the thought realm. The thought that this person has left behind as they go down remains there strongly. But it's nothing that you've ever thought of before. Whoa, where'd that come from? I'll just push that out of my head. Now, my teacher believed that the realm that you didn't want to get to was nirvana or nothingness. Because once you're down there, she believed that all vestiges of your personality have actually dissolved back into the life force energy that is behind everything. She also believed that we are all one life force energy. Right? So we share this energy, but we share it with personality. We can retain that personality. So if I'm doing a reading for you, I'm just reading a part of me using my body to gauge what's going on inside you, because we're both the same being anyway. There's no difference. Yeah. So that's how the Tibetans explain it, the traditional indigenous Tibetans. Right. So you can use that however you like. So like I said before, life's not the opposite of death, the same way love is not the opposite of hate. Right? If you hate something really, really passionately, you are experiencing passion, therefore it's actually a form of love. Right? The opposite of love is apathy, where you just don't care. And unfortunately, I see apathy growing a lot in our society. Right? That's where the problem is with love. Love can be really dysfunctional too. You know, you get all these people just go, oh, just love, just love. You know, you can misuse love as well. Right? You've got to have everything in balance. But the opposite of life is not death, right? Because we know that consciousness exists. We know that people still have personality over there. It is still a form of life. Science is out there looking for life on other planets. It exists, sure it does, but not in the form that they're expecting. Right? And many people get themselves in contact with life on other planets. Right? And the planets themselves, our Earth, many people have experienced. She has a very large spirit, right? Very happy to help us fill up with energy when we get run down. So yeah, so don't try and twist your brain around which came first, the chicken or the egg with this, because it's not worth worrying about. So you can learn to communicate with spirit. I do workshops to show people how easy it is, following very basic, simple principles, to just do things and get a result. So we're not going to dwell on that today. Alison, this is the real Alison Dubois that did the TV show. When we were doing the magazines, Alison used to write for us in the magazines before she did the TV show. And she's like, I've written this, what should I do? And I said, well, send it off. So when she came to Australia, the first thing she did was, I have to come and sit on the magazine stall. So she came over and sat there and did a few talks at the Mind, Body, Spirit for us. But she's very down to earth. And her husband, oh my God. Anybody watch that show, Medium, that she wrote? The guy that played her husband, nothing like him. Her husband is part Canadian Indian and just, he's like 6'2" and drop dead gorgeous. It's like, I love you, Alison, and I'm not really looking at your husband. I just, you just can't help looking at him. He's so gorgeous. But he is a scientist as well. But she's very down to earth, and in her books, the one thing she wants to tell everybody is you learn about this stuff, right? When we go back, when we are, I mean, people get this since the movie Benjamin Button's been out, that when we are dying, we are preparing to be a baby again. We are actually shrinking physically and with less cells in our body, and our body is going, okay, so I'm getting ready to renew myself. Scientifically, again, there are so many animals on this planet that experience a continuation of life that way. You know, all of our scientists are talking about the eternal jellyfish. Have you heard about that? The jellyfish that reduces when it reduces down to just a few cells. Right? But also eagles. Right? Nobody knows how long an eagle is. Right? When an eagle starts to get sick to the point of death, and it will go back to its nest and will lose all its feathers, and it looks like an eagle chick. Right? And other eagles, like its partner, because they mate for life, and presumably its children, come and they start feeding it and looking after it, sitting on it, warming it, and eventually that eagle will grow its feathers again. And the only way they can tell the difference between a mature adult who's gone through that process of regeneration and a baby eagle is the mature adult, once he grows his feathers back, knows how to fly straight away. And that's the only way they can tell the difference. But he really regenerates and goes back to that childlike stage, so he can do that again. So the concept of us going back to a single cell and going inside our mothers and getting ready to come back as a life is supported by life as it exists already on this planet, as science has studied it. Right? There are several creatures that do this, that don't actually completely lose everything. They just reduce themselves down and then come back, right? Which is what we're doing. Right? So Alison said you've got to learn the rules, right? Now, all you need to know to start working with spirit yourself is the two main rules. If you call spirit, it will come, right? And that's why the Aborigines were so intent about not speaking their name, not hanging on, right? Not keeping those ashes forever of that person. Keep the ashes while you grieve and then release them, you know? Let the person go. Finish that up. Let them reincarnate without you constantly calling them back to this life. Right? Because if you call them in, they come. And the Indigenous believe that what you're doing is stopping them going around their song lines. All right? So they've got to complete their song lines or the journey around their traditional lands to get to the jumping off spot to heaven, which is usually their main water source or their main water hole, their sacred water hole. Sometimes it can be the ocean. Right? So if you do want to call spirit in, if you need to complete your stuff, if you're grieving somebody, call them in. Call them in and complete your grief. Right? Let that spirit come into you. Don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. They cannot physically touch you. Right? They just can't. Right? Right. This is a couple of photos of me doing a hand fasting, a wedding, where I'll call spirit in to actually give blessing. And you get, like I said before, you catch spirit on photo. This is a wedding photographer. He showed me the photo and went, "What is happening?" I've never had a photo like this before. I said, "Well, called spirit in to give a blessing." And so spirit comes in. All right. All right. So there's lots and lots of different types of spirit. All right. Spirits of the elements, of nature. Spirits of the dead are only one sort of spirit that we're working with. Spirits of the planets, which we already spoke about. Spirits of time, they're just lots and lots of different types of spirit. So I thought what I'd show you discuss with you really quickly are 3 different kinds of spirits that people talk about. Right? People often ask me, are angels, spirit guides, people that have passed over? And certainly in one incident, I believe they are. Right? So angels, as we said before, haven't been incarnated in the flesh in this world. So the feeling that comes in with them, if you call in your angels, is very light, it's very airy, it's very uplifting, right? Because they haven't had the weight and the warmth of life yet. But the fairies, devas and the other elementals that are in the spirits that keep this planet alive are warm, very lively. If you put your hand into a compost heap, what do you feel? Warmth, right? Because there's lots of life force energy in there, right? And They're the mischievous ones. They're usually the ones that cause the mischief. So when I was a poltergeist, or when the poltergeist activity was happening around me, yes, it was my abilities waking up within me, but it was also spirit on the other side going, oh my goodness, this person's going to be aware we're here. Let's make sure they know. So this two-way communication thing starts to happen, right? And they're saying now, with their poltergeist studies, it used to be 1 in 1,000 that we had, and that was only in the 1960s, the late 1960s, early 1970s. Children will experience some sort of poltergeist activity. Now it's about 1 in 100. It's about 1% of children born. So it's becoming a very common, natural phenomenon, right? So our communication with spirit is opening up, right? In indigenous cultures, communication with spirit is not a big thing. It happens all the time. All Asian cultures have a family shrine out the back where they honour the people who have passed over, and they will go out and talk to, if they need an answer to a question, they go and talk to their father that passed over, and they'll light some incense, put an orange on the altar and go, I need an answer, either answer me now or in my dreams tonight, and they get answers, right? But our culture, 200 years we've been isolated from this, right? So here's the photos that are in the book. Spirits of nature, we often get those. Spirits of air often come through as this lightning type phenomenon. Spirit of fire, all that lady did was light a cigarette. There's no car lights or anything there. There was no mist or fog. It was just a very clear night and she lit that cigarette. This is a lady from Toowoomba. She lost her grandmother the month before. Right? I don't know if you can see that really clearly. Quite often you can't. It's in the book quite clearly, but if I, have a look in the book, or come and ask me after and I'll show you. But there's actually very clearly a quite tall woman behind her as a grey outline leaning over, and that was a digital photograph as well. So sometimes these projectors don't give the detail that you need, but it's quite clearly there. So even death can't keep a Polish grandmother away from her daughter's graduation. Right? That one's quite clear. That's quite famous now. It's done the rounds of the internet. But you can see what he's thinking. Remember I was saying about someone who's recently passed over, doesn't know he's dead. He's not concerned about himself at the moment. He's a young fella. What's he concerned about? Oh my God, what happened to my car? Right? You can see the personality is still there. You can still capture the personality in the photos. Right? And the fact, what makes it evidence is that it happens over and over and over again. Things like this can be faked, right? So you can see the bum print and the hands and the legs on the bed. But the story that came with it was so genuine from an older lady. She looked after her very sick older mother who'd passed away in that bed. She used to sit on the chair and still talk to her mum. And somebody asked her to take a photo, and as far as she could see, there was no dent in the bed. And the dent came out in the photo. And she was so sincere and down to earth. I put it in the magazine. And we were discussing it one night in one of the groups. And you can't quite see it here. Have a look in the book. You'll see it in the book. Somebody said to me, did she have a kitten? And just under the bed here, you can see a kitten's face. And apparently one of the things that she did before she was bedridden was she looked after this sick kitten, and the kitten passed away, and that's when she said to her daughter, oh, this means I'm going to die. All right, so the kitten's still there with her as well. Ooh, I just got goosebumps. So that's why I put it in. I believe that's a sincere one. When you see these spirit photos, please be critical. Right? There are people out there who fake them. There's an app you can get on your iPhone. It's a ghost app, and you take a photo and it puts a ghost in it for you. Right? So be aware when people do show you stuff that there are fakes out there. Right? Use your common sense. Don't believe everything you see. That's why it was set up between Harry Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, that you've got to be analytical and critical about what you see, but base it on your own experience, right? And trust your own experience, because your experiences are real. And I had somebody ask me about, oh, it's not coming out either, is it? I had somebody ask me about this. This is a gravestone here. It's in the book as well. And in front of the gravestone is a big orb, right? And you can just sort of see the start of the orb there, but behind the orb is a few crosses, right, made out of metal. Now orbs can simply be reflection of light in the lens from something else, right? So you've got to be critical of the orbs as well. Some orbs are absolutely genuine. There's some fantastic photos of orbs, but if it's from reflection, right, you've got to go, maybe not. But in this photo, poking its head out from behind the gravestone is somebody looking back at the camera. And I said, well, what about this character here? And they went, oh, I didn't even see that. So have a good look around. There's a photo in one of the books, in the book about the immigration station in Sydney. And this gentleman goes, I know I can feel something, I know I can feel something. And he kept enlarging and looking at the photo, and eventually he found, did it make it any better? Can you see that now?
When it first came up, I could see it, and then it went.
Yeah?
Can you just go...
go back and forward. Okay,
just
that's
go away and then come
Okay,
back.
previous, next. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Right?
It was there.
All right, I'll do it one more time. Now look behind the gravestone. Previous. Good looking. Good. Yeah. Do you see it behind the gravestone? Yeah. So, so look around in your photos. And he found a Chinaman with a hat on in a doorway that had no light, but there's light coming through it showing this backlit Chinaman, right? And he knew there was something there, and he just kept looking in the photo for it. If you get that feeling that there's something in the photo, look for it, right? This is me doing a talk like this to a group in Toowoomba, and somebody took a photo, right? You can see this, somebody going, hey, come over here, pay attention here. They try really hard to get your attention. They try really hard to get your attention. If I stand here like this, does that sort of look like this? Oh, hang on, stand up. They try really hard. And Jenny Janowski took the photo, so she's happy to answer any questions about it. There's nothing faked about that photo. So the two main rules of working with spirit: if you call spirit in, no matter what sort of spirit you want to work with, it will come. So if you want to speak to your mother who passed over, if you want to connect with spirit, if you want somebody around you to protect you as you're walking home at night, call spirit. Actually verbally say something, because if you call it, they will come. Don't be afraid, okay? But if you don't want them there, like the mischievous ones, you just ask them to leave, right? There is no such thing as an evil spirit. That's like saying, is evil electricity, right? Spirit is spirit, right? It has a personality, but when you get to the other side, people lose a lot of the stuff that they have. I connected with a South American landlord in Southport. Had one of his tenants die. She was an older lady who became a heroin addict later in life. And before she died, she was doing all sorts of things. We started to get upset with her because she was trying to borrow money off everybody, and we started to get worried that she was stealing. He said, look, she was disturbed before, can you just make sure that she's good? And like, he knew. I never ever spoke to him about being a medium. He just knew. It's in the South American culture. They just can feel these things sometimes. I said, sure, I'll do my best. So I went in the room, meditated, lit some incense. She came in completely free of the addiction, sorry for the things that she'd sold. The things that were worrying her while she was alive, you don't have those. People worry when they get to the other side, well, my husband wants me to remarry. You know, he's on the other side, he's gone now, but I don't think he'd want me to remarry. Because you don't have a body, you don't have those sexual desires anymore. Right? There's no problem. People just want you to be happy and enjoy your life on the other side. The messages that come through over and over and over again from the other side are, you're alive, enjoy it. Do whatever you can to enjoy this life right now. And they get it when they get to the other side. We're missing the point of this life, and the point of this life is joy, right? To enjoy ourselves, to be happy. They love us, they're going to come back to us, but they want us to be happy. Because the happier we are, the longer our life is going to last, and the more we will enjoy it. We get the more out of it. That's the lesson for this life. It's not to suffer, right? Our lesson for this life is to be joyful. Right. So I spoke to you about the Indigenous belief system. So just remember, if you're going to do some work with people, Right? I'll just go through, how much time have we got? Well, we'll just do this for 5 minutes and then we'll wind up and you can ask me any questions, because I know we've gone through a lot of information really quickly. I've been a little bit flustered today, not my usual fluent self, because I did rush to get here. Didn't speak, maybe a little bit. Right. But these are the main things you've got to remember. So if you call spirit in, it will come. If you ask spirit to go, it will leave. Right? If something happens and you're feeling uncomfortable with spirit, remember, you set the rules. So often I get people with a young girl who's starting to manifest mediumship abilities, spirit's starting to worry her, and they'll wake her up in the middle of the night. Has anybody been woken up in the middle of the night with spirit? Yeah. That's rude. And you tell them. I mean, if a person came into your room in the middle of the night and woke you up, you wouldn't put up with it. Right? So remember, you set the rules. So if they wake up in the middle of the night, go, excuse me? If it's important, you can tell me in the morning. But if you do say, tell me at 9 o'clock in the morning, sit down with a piece of paper and ask them to come in and give you that message again, because they will be there. If you forget and get caught up with your daily life, they will pester you if you've made them a promise. Okay? But you set the rules. You set the time, you set the place, and if they misbehave, you tell them to go. Right? Don't let them impose. Right? No looking over showers or anything like that, which some people have reported. Right? I've had that happen. We moved into the old Scientologist drug rehab centre on the Gold Coast. That was our big Shambhala Awareness Centre. We changed energy in there really quick. We got it for a song because nobody had bought it, because one of the big things they do when they're getting people out of their drug cycles is they put them in saunas and let them sweat it out. And if you let them sweat for 5 hours at 70 degrees, it cures a lot of addictions. But apparently they put 5 people in the sauna there one day and wandered off and forgot them, and they all dehydrated and died. So nobody would touch the place. And we had, when we moved in, a few spirits, that were just mischievous. But as soon as they realised what we were there for, they were quite cooperative. I never tell a spirit to go to the light or get out of there if I don't have to. Right? Spirit will go when it's ready. A lot of spirit hangs around because it wants to. It's nothing to worry about. Out at Mount Isa, I was doing some work out at Mount Isa there, and I kept seeing this little old lady in the corner sitting in a chair, and I turned around, there's no chair and no little old lady. And this function room, which was like this, it was in the front of a big hotel. So I asked the publican, I said, have you had other reports of a little old lady in this room sitting in a chair? And he just started laughing. I said, okay, funny joke. Now let me in on the joke. He said, that's my mum. This used to be her bedroom. All right? So what am I going to do? Clear the place and tell her to go back to the light? She loves the place. She wants to be there. Right? And believe me, that pub was built by her husband. Right? She's very attached to it. Right, if you move into a place and you've got a little old lady spirit in particular, you get a lot of those, that you become aware that they're in the house. You quite often hear them walking around at night because they used to stay up late or get up early to do things, so that you'll hear them move around. They become a protective spirit of that house because they're interested in that house. So it's good to leave them there, because if there's going to be a fire, if there's going to be a problem, guess who's going to wake you up to put out that fire, not only to protect you, but also to protect the house. Right? So you don't always want to get rid of them. Right? If they're being a pest, sure. Right? Sometimes they have unresolved stuff that they need to resolve as well, and if you're aware of working with spirit, you can do that. You can help them resolve their issues so they can move on. And that's a good job. But this there's a spirit in here, I'm going to clear the area and send it to the light. Sending it to the light is telling a ghost to die. Go down to the next level. They've only got 2 choices. Either go down to the shade and shadow, which is where they go if they're not ready, or they reincarnate. So they've got to do one or the other if they pass to the other side of the ghost realm. So it's a big responsibility once you start playing with spirit, because you are playing with their lives. They've got to interact with us. Right? And once you start interacting with them, do it responsibly and do it compassionately. Right? They're not evil. You can never have a room that has no spirit in it. Right? If we had no spirit in this room, none of us would be alive. Right? There has to be spirit in the room. But if there's one that's becoming prominent, right, making itself a pest, or bringing itself to your attention, There's either a reason, they just want you to acknowledge that they're there, is most of the time, and they'll live with you quite happily and cohabitate, right? Or if they are being a pest, you just tell them to go in that case. Set a time, but it's always a good idea to put on a videotape or a recorder. We've got a gentleman up the back recording, so it'll be interesting if anything comes out. Is it tape or digital? Digital. Yeah. We used to find that the magnetic tapes would get a lot of stuff. When I started doing psychic readings for one of the psychic fairs that used to go around, they had cassettes. And every once a year at least, I used to have somebody ring up and go, "Oh, you brought Dad through for us, and we recorded it, and we could hear Dad in the background. Listen." So I get these excited phone calls. Yeah, and it's not a lot. It's probably 1 or 2 words, and just enough for them to get the message. But spirit works on a lot of the same rules that electricity follows. So the electricity responds really well. Electromagnetic radiation responds really well. And in fact, there's a phenomenon called EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, where you would pick it up on magnetic tapes, on TV. Sometimes the white noise channels that we used to have EVP on it. We had a really horrible movie about white noise, which was terrible. It was nothing, like you only ever get good stuff come through. Like there's a very famous one that happened recently just after Robin Williams died. This gentleman did a recording, he was bringing through spirit, and just at about the same time that Robin Williams died, he got a voice that sounded like Robin Williams on his recording. Did anybody see that one go around? No? Yeah, you can look it up on the internet. He's got, it's very clearly Robin Williams talking. Right. And he's going, "Oh my goodness, this sounds like Robin Williams." And he didn't find out until afterwards that Robin Williams had passed away. So it's always a good idea if you're doing some mediumship work to have some recording going. If you've got any old magnetic cassettes around, fantastic. If not, digital does work, but it's not as sensitive, I think, to what we're trying to pick up. Wash when you're finished, right? Now, wash when you're finished. Because when you start to do mediumship work, you get a thin, oily film on your skin. Anybody here do mediumship work? They'll know, right? You just feel like after you finish doing mediumship work, you want to have a shower, right? It's ectoplasm. It doesn't mean like Ghostbusters, you're not getting slimed, but it is the residue of life, and they come back close to life, so this oily stuff starts to manifest through you, right? So it's a good idea to wash when you finish, so you really break that connection. Right? People who do this work on a regular basis in indigenous cultures, like they will go into graveyards and they do what they call graveyard work, where they'll go in if somebody's died upset, they go in and they'll put food on their grave and sit on the grave and actually talk to them and try and comfort them, but they always come home and soak afterwards. Right? It's very important. First thing they do, don't talk to me until I've had a soak, right? And they wash themselves. Ouija boards. Everybody goes, "Oh my goodness, Ouija boards cause all sorts of problems with spirits." No, people cause problems with spirit with Ouija boards. Ouija board is just a tool to enable spirit to speak with you, but if you use it incorrectly, it will cause problems. Right? There are rules about how to use Ouija boards. Right? And the most important one, if anybody does use a Ouija board to try and communicate with spirit, because if you call them in, they will come. Right? But most people who've used a Ouija board know they work. Is not to put your fingers on the Ouija board and go, "Is there anybody out there?" Right? It's like a young girl walking into a pub in a short skirt and going, "Anybody want to buy me a drink?" The ones that buy her a drink are not the ones she should be talking to. Right? If you do want to use any form to help you communicate with spirit, whether it's automatic writing or Ouija boards, you say who you want to speak to. Call in the specific one that you want to talk to. If you want to talk to Auntie Mary, you call Auntie Mary in. If you want to talk to your angels, you call your angels in. Right? But don't just go anybody, because the mischievous ones will go, "Oh, good opportunity, I can play with humans. I can give them a little bit of a scare." They won't hurt you, but they will try and scare you if you get the mischievous ones. Mind you, when we did the TV show, we had to go into Pentridge Prison, where they did all the executions, and they wanted us to connect with Ned Kelly over there. Pentridge Prison is really interesting because it's chock-a-block full of spirit. Right? There was one girl in the group who was terrified of going in there. She's supposed to be an experienced medium, right? She's going, I'm going to get a walk in, I'm going to get a walk in. You could see herself working herself up. And of course, as soon as she walked in there, she got a walk in, right? She was like almost wishing it on herself. You don't get walk-ins if you don't let them in, right? Doesn't happen. People talk about possession, exorcism, all that sort of thing. People who have that experience are people who have called it in, generally, right? And you can, without exception, this has been the case with the people I've dealt with this, and they're not wanting to let it go because the spirit makes them feel special, right? The spirit wants to get out of there, usually. But they've been with that person so long, the person doesn't want to let it go because it makes them feel special. Imagine that. If you were a spirit that had the ability to do a walk-in, are you really going to pick the crazy lady at the end of the street, or are you going to pick a rock star? Who would you pick? Right? You wouldn't pick the crazy lady at the end of the street. The crazy lady needs that to feel special. And you don't need a complicated exorcism when you're dealing with them. You simply go, it's time for you to go. Leave. Spirit will go and usually will stay out for about 2 weeks, but if they call it back, it will come back. The interesting thing was when we did the Ned Kelly thing, I'm sorry, watching the time, was they asked us to communicate with Ned Kelly, right? So we all sat down, the whole group of us that was on the TV show, and we did a Ouija board with a seance with a Ouija board with all the psychics. And we got some very clear information about where Ned's body was, but his cousin Dan, I think, came through. I'm not sure of the whole Ned Kelly history. And his cousin came through and it was him. And we double checked and triple checked that it was him. We kept saying, so are you him? Are you here to help us? But when we came through, they said, okay, can you call Ned Kelly in? And I went, okay, I'll try and connect. So I said, Ned, can you come here? And as I'm walking up, he was very much there with me. He wasn't very tall, actually. Very much with me as I was walking up. And he, as I'm getting towards the gallows, he was getting really frightened. And I made the mistake of saying to him, how do you feel? And as they were filming me, this red line of the rope came out on my neck, right? And I still have a bit of a mark there, it's discoloured my skin. The red line came out of the rope on my neck, and I started to feel what he was feeling as he was approaching the gallows. And I'm going, okay, I don't want to see, thank you for showing me, I don't want to see this anymore, and pushed it away. I knew something was happening. I thought they were actually seeing Ned behind me because the cameraman was going, oh, fuck, oh. But they wouldn't put it on TV. They said, no, it's too scary. People will think we faked it. And there were several incidences where we did stuff like that. It was like, oh my God, this is too real. We're not putting this on TV. The first episode, they had such good psychics that did such good things because they got the 7 best in Australia. And they kept cutting things out, throwing them on the floor. You know, the second show they couldn't get the results that they were after. They got people that could certainly show them the results in the first show. So, and we all worked together in the first show. In the second show, they tried to keep everybody separate as a competition. But psychics don't compete. Psychics work together. We need to help people, so we help each other. Yeah, but these things happen. Yes. So, in summary, spirit is real. Yes, you can learn to communicate with spirit. If you want me to, I do a workshop and I can show you how to do this, right, in a scientifically repeatable fashion. Any skeptic who says to me there's no such thing as spirit, I say, come and do my workshop and I will show you there is. Somebody that you know that I know nothing about will call in, right? You will call them in. A medium means being in the middle. Spirit doesn't actually want to communicate with me. I know that spirit hangs around me because I do communicate with it, but being a medium means you're getting in between the person who's in spirit and the person who's in the physical that want to talk to each other. Your job as a medium really should be to put them together and get yourself out of the way, right? So that they can then experience that firsthand for themselves. Once they experience spirit firsthand for themselves, they know it's real. Everybody who today has said that they've had a firsthand experience with spirit, it's real. Do not doubt yourself. You are the world's expert on you. Don't let anybody else tell you that they are the expert on you. You know what you've experienced. Trust that. It is real. Some of the best minds in history believe in life after life. You cannot destroy the personality of the spirit. It does survive. But if we finish our grieving, if we move towards joy, we get to have them back. All right? So don't hang on too long. All right, so that is probably enough for today. I said I'd finish at 1:15, but I'm happy to answer some questions. Is there anybody that's got to leave right on time? Again, I apologise for running late. All right, so anybody want to ask any questions? Yeah. Do you need this?
Oh no, I'm thinking now. Probably one that I'm probably thinking about. We've all heard stories of negative spirit experiences. Things like exorcism, the jinn, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 99.9% of that is people's fear. Right? Like if you stand on top of a building and look down, the height isn't evil, but your heart will race. Right? Height's not going to kill you. You're just up somewhere high. But most of the time, when people experience spirit for the first time, their heart races, they get flushes, they get weak at the knee, and they go, oh my God, something's trying to victimize me. Right? Very common experience when people have start to experience spirit is they have a typical poltergeist experience where they will feel like they're immobile on the bed at night. They half wake up and they get a zinging electrical feeling go through their body. They know that there's a presence with them, right? But the body can't move. Right? That's a known phenomenon, right? Nobody's ever been hurt. What happens is, because spirit has been communicating with you while you are closer to its realm, while your consciousness is lower, what happens is that the energy doesn't come back to your nervous system straight away. So it's not you being pinned down by spirit, but your body, your spirit doesn't actually click back in with your body immediately, so you can't quite move your spirit immediately. And that terrifies a lot of people. If you can't move, and there's so many books written around because of the church influence. All of those exorcism movies are paid for by the Catholic Church because it's the only way they're making money at the moment is through exorcisms. They want to put an exorcist in every diocese in the world at the moment because otherwise the Catholic Church is going to go broke. So they're really pushing it hard to sell this. There's nothing to be afraid of. When you have that experience with spirit, what you need to do is go, what are you trying to tell me? And spirit will go, oh, good, she's listening. And it will never happen again, right? Otherwise, they'll come back to you 3 or 4 nights in a row, and you'll have that same disconnected from body feeling where you're awake, but you can't move your body until your spirit gets back into your own body. And you go, oh, okay, all right. Nobody's holding you down. Spirit guides quite often, yes, you can get spirits who have not reincarnated, but quite often our spirit guide can actually be our intelligence from a past life of our own self. So, you know, we're talking with that North American Indian person as our spirit guide. Quite often that's ourselves in a past life. We have a bigger part of ourselves that this is only the tip of the iceberg. The biggest part of ourselves can't fit inside here, and it retains a lot of the memories that we lose when we go back to being that one cell, because we don't have all of the cells to make the synapses in the brain. So our higher self, right, can often remember the information from a past life, and when we ask for that information, it will come through as a spirit. Spirit guides are usually intrinsically interested in you because it is you quite often. Yeah. So either that was her in a past life, but that actually sounds like she connected with a spirit that just had chose not to reincarnate. And they can choose to not reincarnate. A person who's passed over doesn't have any other knowledge than what they had while they were alive, right? I went through a situation where I had a couple who lost their son tragically. We were able to really give them a lot of closure. We went through, they came with a list of questions. Where was his watch? Why did this happen? And he was able to answer all of those questions for them. And their very last question was, and what should we do with our investments on the stock market? And he's a 17-year-old boy, and he was just like, what the? You know? Yeah, so no, they don't. They don't become immediately godlike just because they get on the other side. So if you have the ability to be able to see into the future for yourself, but whatever their level of awareness is when they pass over, they take that with them, and that's where they'll come back in their next life too. Before I ever did any of this, I used to tell my mum about remembering when I was in the belly, right? but you can actually go back beyond that. And this is reported again and again. You do come back and you go, the way I describe it to people, the way people get it, is when you were at primary school and you go, okay, we're going to play, and you'll be the cowboy and I'll be the Indian. You do that. Well, look, I've even spoken to people who have decided that they've met like the reincarnation of their father, and they said, well, when he's a child, when he's old enough, I'll be reincarnated to him. So they've actually gone and found that reincarnation in this life. And it was pretty, I believe it actually happened. I do believe it actually happened. And I have an analytical mind, right? But from what I've seen of that case that I've heard about, I believe he did pick that person. And generally when people come back from experience, they look pretty much the same. They don't very rarely change sex. They can happen, right? Very rarely they come back as cats, even though I know somebody wants to come back as a cat. But they generally stay the same. So in your next life, you'll look the same. And when I had very first had this discussion with somebody and I said, well, the jury's out, let's ask the universe, within a week, I had two of my students turn up with pictures of me, one by Leonardo da Vinci and one by Botticelli. And it's my face. It's not just my face, it's my hands, my hair, everything. Right? And then going back, I did a regression with one of them, and then I've since been able to go back and find out all about this lady called Celia Galliani and her life, and it's what I gave in that regression. So, yeah. But you can choose. I'm adopted, but the biological child of my parents that adopted me was incredibly handicapped. And he would communicate and cooperate with me where he wouldn't cooperate with everybody else, but I didn't even realise as a child we were communicating on a deeper level. He'd just go calm around me because I got him, you know. And I'd often say to him when I grew up to an adult, why did you choose to do this to yourself? He said, I wanted to be looked after. I was lazy. I just wanted to be completely cared for. And he got his wish, but he got a bit more than what he bargained for, you know. So he passed away. He had a syndrome called DeLange syndrome. And he lived to 36, which is older than anybody's ever lived with that, because my dad cared for him like a silkworm. So he picked somebody who would care for him like a silkworm, but he paid a price for that as well. Yeah. So any other questions? Okay, all right. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much.
And here's just a little token of appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
Go home, put that in the fridge and